It's going to be a little messy, but you know, that's what stories are. So we are a group of people who like to talk. I don't know anyone in this group who doesn't like to talk. But above all, we like to tell stories. And we like to sit around the kitchen table, which is sort of the symbol of our foundation. It has been from the very beginning. Petra and I would have a kitchen table, and Ellen and I have a kitchen table, and people would come to it, and many of the rest of you have kitchen tables. Peter Shattuck here remembered that he was crawling around under our kitchen table when we were creating the foundation. So this is where the real action takes place, where people tell stories and try to help each other and engage, even raising each other's children in some ways. And we started planning the Petra Foundation about 26 years ago around my table. We didn't really have any idea what we were doing, but everyone knew that certainly that I was a lousy cook, and I needed all the help that I could get. And we also knew, and this is a more important piece of knowledge, we knew there were lots of people out there engaged in the human rights struggle, people who were working to overcome injustice and personal loss, as I've just talked about. And we knew we wanted to connect with them and support them in whatever way we could. But we were full of ideas, but we were also full of doubts, which is probably a good way to start, because we doubted that we could do anything. We doubted that we didn't even know, how are we going to reach people? How are we going to find people? How are we going to engage? How are we going to support this? How are we going to fund it? And I'd say the breakthrough came when our founding father and great friend Scott Armstrong said, "You can have my gigantic investigative journalist Rolodex." And anybody remember what a Rolodex is? Yeah. That'll show you. So Scott said the Rolodex is going to do it, and that became, next to the kitchen table, the second symbol of our foundation was Scott's Rolodex. And we basically put it right to work. And we had our first 4 fellows, 3 of whom are here tonight. And here I would like them to stand: Hava Beller, David Hawk, and Joan Tamici. Could you please stand? So each year we brought this constantly growing family of fellows and all of us back to the Petra Awards weekend, and I think it's given us a chance to recharge batteries, expand our network, and re-enter the struggle with renewed hope, greater commitment, and new techniques that we learn from each other every year. So this is our final year of doing this. We will stay connected. We are deeply involved with each other. It's already as a network of activists, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But because it is our final year, I feel I owe it, certainly to myself, and I hope to all of you, to say just a very brief word about those fellows who are here tonight, because each of our dinners is about our new fellows, and that's exciting, and we've just been inspired by them. But I want to just remind you of who we are and what an extraordinary range of talent we have. Julian Agwan is battling against the colonial and military invasion of his native Chamorro community in Guam. Nahar Alam, hold your applause, and if you wish, Julian, you can stand so people can see you, but I'm not, or you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand. Nahar Alam has overcome her own challenges to become a leader for the rights of South Asian domestic workers in the United States. Nahar, thank you. Frank Bardicke is a community activist in Watsonville, California, who supports and inspires farm workers and labor organizers. Hava Beller's award-winning film, The Restless Conscience, tells a powerful story about the Germans who resisted Hitler and confronts us with the question of what we might have done in their place. Socorro Bernasconi is an education activist in Guadalupe, Arizona, fighting for the rights of the Aki Indian and Latino students, having survived herself the tragic loss of her own son to gun violence. Lily Branch Kennedy is assisting the families of young victims of mass incarceration after her son was taken from her to prison. Devin Burkhart tracks white supremacists like the Charleston racist murderer so that they can be stopped before they kill or brought to justice when they do. Jim Callan has battled the mob and fought corruption for 30 years in Youngstown, Ohio. Robin Cannon has organized her community in South Central Los Angeles and blocked a toxic waste dump from being built in their backyard, among other things. Ana Guajardo Carrillo is the founding director of the Centro de Trabajadores Unidos Immigrant Workers Project in Chicago, and a champion of workers' rights in the Latino community and a leader of immigrant rights movement in Illinois. Sandra Campbell Jackson is an advocate of grandparents who raise families because the families themselves may be unable to do so. Hayek Chaum overcame the trauma of being a war refugee to help mobilize Asian immigrant communities in the Bronx against violence and exploitation. Murphy Davis is a pioneering advocate for death row inmates and homeless people at the extraordinary Open Door community that she founded with her husband Ed Loring in Atlanta. Nancy Dorsonville grew up as a displaced person from Haiti and is going on to become a leader and an expert in the struggles of Haitian and other immigrant and refugee groups. Lenny Foster fights for the rights of incarcerated Native Americans to traditional worship, serving as the spiritual advisor to 1,500 prisoners in 89 state and federal facilities across the Northwest. David Hawk confronts the world with his painstaking documentation of the genocide and mass atrocities in Cambodia and North Korea. Michael Hurwitz and Ian Marvey have kept young people from being swept up in the criminal justice system by pioneering urban farming for teenage kids and families in the Red Hook section of Brooklyn. Al Curlin runs a youth leadership program in the Washington Heights section of New York, and earlier this year succeeded in getting the city to approve a bill requiring or allowing youth representation on neighborhood councils in New York. Carrie Ann Lucas is a nationally recognized lawyer and advocate for people with disabilities, who herself is deaf, legally blind, and gets around in a wheelchair. Vivian Nixon leads a successful program in New York City to help formerly incarcerated women like herself achieve economic security by getting a college education, a program she has expanded now to include men as well as women and to mentor young prisoners on Rikers Island. Tyrone Parker founded the Alliance of Concerned Men to organize against youth violence in Washington, D.C. after his own son was killed by a stray bullet as a bystander in a gunfight. Ron Podlasky is a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran of Vietnam and Cambodia who founded a clinic to provide assistance to Cambodian landmine victims. Esther Portillo is a tenant organizer against slumlords in Los Angeles. Danilyn Reeser is the founder of the Gulf Region Advocacy Center and a leader in the struggle against capital punishment. She has defended more than 100 clients facing the death penalty in state and federal courts across the South and Southwest. Jacqueline Robarge is the founder of Power Inside in Baltimore, a health and human rights response to women traumatized by violence, the street economy, and the criminal justice system, which fights bureaucratic hurdles and inadequate services for battered women and provides family support for women in prison. Elena Rodriguez runs the Child Health Insurance Program that provides services to Latino migrant workers in rural Idaho. Victoria Sammartino is a New York City poet and the founder of a poetry workshop for teenage girls incarcerated on Rikers Island. Tim Schermerhorn is the founder and organizer of a group of transportation workers pushing to reform the Transport Workers Union in New York and open it to more minority workers. Sheldon Smith overcame a teenage conviction and 6 months in prison to become the founder of a far-reaching project to teach young black men parenting and life skills, and has just been named a CNN Hero of the Year. Linda Stout grew up in rural North Carolina and went on to become a national community organizer and founder of the Piedmont Peace Project, a multiracial network of textile workers, farmers, and domestic workers. Joan Tomichi is a Hopi education leader who has been instrumental in preparing young Hopi for contemporary life while maintaining respect for traditional Hopi values. Ken Toughlin is the founder of Shakespeare Behind Bars, which is a program to bring Shakespeare performances to imprisoned men in federal and state prisons, starting in Kentucky, but now in many, many other states as well. Ken Toole battles extremists and racism in Montana as an elected public official and a founder of the Montana Human Rights Network. Natalia Tracy is a tireless advocate for immigrant women and low-wage workers in Boston. And Gina Womack is the founder of Family and Friends of Louisiana's Incarcerated Children, fighting on behalf of at-risk children, and also a member of the Petra Board of Trustees. So I want to ask you all to stand and have everybody These are the stories of the fellows who are here tonight. But you know what? There are many similar stories that reach across this room and far outside of this room of people who have been involved with the foundation who are not fellows. I'm not going to give you all the names because that would, you know that would turn into a filibuster and you wonder where my phone is. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to give you examples, because I think it's important as we celebrate these 25 years to know what these examples are, because they're really quite extraordinary, just as the fellows are. Writing the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of Martin Luther King. Creating a community-owned bank in Washington, D.C. Speaking out against regressive sentencing laws that have produced the racist mass incarceration that we have today. Battling racism in the U.S. and Hungary by showing what communities can do to mobilize resistance to racist acts. Pioneering the concept of positive deviance as a way of tackling social problems. Winning the right to place a windmill on a New York City rooftop to co-generate electricity. Supporting whistleblowers who challenge government secrecy and surveillance. Running the first nationwide community service program in America since the 1930s, probably the largest ever. Defending affirmative action as an essential instrument of justice in the federal government. Working for the release of political prisoners in China, helping end the genocide in Bosnia, and performing many other large and small acts that challenge injustice as part of the great story of the Petra Foundation. Now, two of those that I have mentioned are from founders of the Petra Foundation who are no longer with us. Eli Siegel, who was the person who ran the largest public service program in history in America, and John O'Sullivan, who heroically, way back in about 1971, if my memory serves me, got the right to put a windmill up on a New York City building to challenge Consolidated Edison and all the other basic monopolists of the electricity production in order to be able to co-generate electricity. And he won this in a federal court. So I want to remember that, because they are with us too as we go through this. So, thanks. A quick word about the future. We've spent time today talking about it in smaller groups, but I'll say a few words about it here tonight. We're celebrating a very long journey over these 25 years, and our family has clearly grown from the kitchen table days, but we've remained a family. That's the really wonderful thing about the foundation. No matter how much it grows, it remains a family. And it's a family with hopes and dreams and setbacks and victories. Now these hopes and dreams, I think, are going to be reflected